Welcome to Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast. I'm your host, Luke Darnell. While you're enjoying this podcast, please share it out on your social media and also be sure to like the podcast on the service of your choice. It's Super Bowl week, which means today's guest is probably out in LA making quiche Lorraine for Peyton Manning or stuffed pork loin for Terry Bradshaw. And it's definitely being cooked on a Traeger. So please welcome Chad Ward from Traeger Grills and Whiskey Bent Barbecue for this awesome part one of his podcast. Alrighty, this man, he really doesn't need much introduction. One of my longtime friends in barbecue. And we've kind of switched roles a little bit. So I'm here today with Chad Ward from, wow, I'm not even sure how to describe where you're from anymore. You got Traeger, we got Whiskey Bent, you're just, or as I like to say, you're the guy that makes waffles for Dan Patrick. So, how you doing, bro?
Good, brother. Good to be here, man. It is funny. The roles are reversed a little bit.
They are, and I couldn't be happier to have you be on here. You were one of our earliest supporters in barbecue, and you were also there for a lot of our bigger moments in barbecue.
Yes, that was really awesome.
And my mom asked about you until her last days. She fell in love with you down there in Alabama.
I'll tell you what, man. It's something, and that's what I think people miss about what we do. Yeah, we compete, this and that, but man, I've built a whole second family. I know you have too. And a lot of those, second family are just as close as brothers and sisters of blood. You know what I mean? And yeah, to get to spend that time with your family, and then man, to punctuate it, with you winning the whole thing, on the barbecue side. I mean, it was just amazing, bro. It was so cool.
It was a good time, and I'll never forget that moment on stage. They're going through the top five, and I'm standing there hammered.
Yep.
And you're standing right beside me, and they get the first, and you're like staring at me and hitting me, and I'm like, it's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, it's you, bro. It's you. Yeah,
man, it's so much fun. And that's one of the things I missed about WSC back then, when a lot of us still went and cooked. It was, the way they did awards and everything was pretty awesome. You know what I mean? Like and the 2-day cook, and it was a really, really fun format. Back, I don't know, back before it got too businessy, I guess.
Right, and because you thought you were in some sort of barbecue Olympics almost. Like, yeah, I ended up having to cook, what was it, 3 days in a row or something. Yep. And, I'd never been in any kind of situation like that. And to be surrounded by a bunch of great people, it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And you had your hometown event this past weekend, the Lakeland Pig Fest.
That's awesome. Man, we did. So 25th anniversary. We missed you. But man, so awesome. I got to tell you, man, one of the highlights of my weekend. So December, I'm out in Mississippi at Heath Riles' Christmas party. He threw a Christmas party, invited a bunch of us. I know you guys were invited, couldn't make it, but just had a good group. And so Tommy Houston happened to be coming through. And for you guys that don't know, Tommy Houston's old school competition barbecue, Checkered Pig, out of Virginia. Back when I had my show, I'd always try to have Tommy on once or twice a year, because not only could he talk, competition barbecue, but guy's been in the restaurant business forever. Does one of the biggest barbecue vending events, probably maybe the biggest barbecue vending event of the year out there in that Reno rib cook-off. You're talking about those guys are putting out, tractor trailer loads of cooked ribs. And just a great guy, great husband, great father. And so we were catching up, man. Me and Tommy hadn't seen each other in a while. And I said, you need to dust it off, cuz you need to come out and cook Pig Fest. It's 25th anniversary. You always used to make the ride down. And he said, well, Lisa, her sister's down there. That's his wife. And man, I think that'll work out, cuz I think it'll work out. And shoot, Tommy comes down here, tells me he's like, man, when I was up at 4 a.m. this morning putting that brisket on the Jambo, I was cussing you. It's cold. And man, he wins brisket and takes a 5th overall out of a. I mean, you got to say, Luke, besides like the World Championships, Lakeland's always a pretty nasty field. I mean, there's some dang good cooks come down here last weekend of January every year. So That was awesome. My niece crushed it in the kids' queue again. She second steak, first in sauce, first in chicken, grand champ. So that was awesome. And then we cooked with my buddy Tim Malloy from Backyard Bros, and we turned in 18th overall with a 7th in brisket. But you had me and Tim together. We had a damn good time. We definitely probably won the party scene.
Well, so what you're saying is if you helped Tim Malloy that you basically did everything. He's kind of the Myron Mixon of Florida barbecue right now. He's got a lot of handlers.
You had me and Tim there, which are very good supervisors. But we got to give all the credit really to Mike, Monica, and Patty for doing and Jack Peacock for doing all the heavy lifting. That's the bros crew there. But and then it was fun. Got to bring my buddy Benny Kendrick Kendrick Barbecue on Instagram. He's been to a couple barbecue competitions, but had never been to Lakeland and never came here. And it's cool to be able to take, people from the social media world and bring them into, what got us started. Because a lot of guys, that used to be the way to come up in barbecue, right? If you wanted to have a brand or something like that, you kind of came up through the competition ranks or the restaurant ranks. But now, over the last decade, we've got this whole social media thing where, people haven't had to open a restaurant or start a competition team to have a great following and build a great brand. So it's cool to let them kind of see what we do and how we got started.
Absolutely. And Lakeland is forever will be one of my favorite contests. And I hated missing it this year, but I had a great opportunity to go out to the Midwest and do some learning, which ended up being cut short by COVID. So that's, maybe it's karma for me skipping Pig Fest. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what, the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise. We'll be doing it again next year, last weekend of January, and we'll hold space for you, old boy.
I'll be there, buddy. Well, let's get into it a little bit. I have a lot of questions, and I know how this is going to go with me and you. Probably going to get through 5 of them, which means we'll probably have to do a part 2, but that's down. Totally fine. So you've really done a great job of taking barbecue and making a career out of it. What was the biggest turning point in your life as a pitmaster?
Oh man, that's a great question, Luke. For me, I would say one of the big parts was going from just being a competition cook to being in the barbecue business. And that first step for me was opening our brick and mortar store here in Lakeland. It was myself, my cousin, and the guy that helped me start the team, Jared Hatcher, and my cousin Adam Norman. And we put together $30,000 and started a store. And for anybody who's ever started a barbecue store, $30,000 is not a lot. But that was inventory, build out everything. Super lucky. My cousin, they own the building, so we got a cut rate lease. Him and Jared are super handy, so they did most of the build out stuff. But man, we started it kind of one of those, if you build it, will they come? They did. And I think that was a huge step of learning the business, kind of becoming a barbecue entrepreneur and putting that with, the skills and the ability to cook and then teach. But I would say if I had to go look at one moment, it was early on. I think I'd been competing 2.5 years, but when I got the call to be on Chopped, and I think that was the first year they did Chopped Grill Masters, and they talked to 1,200 people, and I was fortunate to be one of the 16 that they picked. I didn't make it out of the first round. I mean, I'd still love to go back. If anybody from Chopped's listening, it was a lot of fun. And I feel like with 10 extra years of experience now, I could definitely hold my own. But to me, it was getting that exposure that really, really helped. And then I was just hungry, man. I just love test cooking and trying to be the best that I could be. But I definitely think Chopped was a great stepping stone to get a little bit of notoriety.
Absolutely. And you've turned that into, you're working for one of the biggest grill companies in the world and one of the best products in the world with Traeger, and the store's still rocking. And you get to go to some,
and in between those two, we got the line of barbecue rubs. That's been like,
right.
I mean, really, really, it was one of those that, you take a rub, you use it, but then scaling it up and, is everybody going to like it? Was it something that we built just for the judges, and just, taking our comp recipes with small tweaks. So when I say small tweaks, I'm talking maybe 2-3% recipe change. Probably most of that's for batching and not even flavor, but that's been really cool too, because that's when it's cool, like when you're going through the airport and people come by. And the easy thing about me is, even in an airport with the mask, I'm a big guy. I'm usually always wearing my shorts. So if people are like, "Oh man, is that Chad?" They kind of look and go, "Yeah, it's got to be." What other guy would dress like that and walk through an airport? But they come up and, "Oh, dude, man, I love the Rocks," or "I love the Blazing Bird." Da, 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 da. Or, "I was in Academy the other day and they carry all your rubs." I mean, super cool.
Yeah, man, that's great. It's just staggering to me how, and I think I might create another podcast just about the barbecue business and because there's so many examples of guys that have turned our hobby into a livelihood, and I'm one of them that's trying to do that. And it's just great to learn and great to hear from people like yourself that have been so successful. Now, back in competition world, though, I have to think that you had some habits and rituals and routines and things that you had to do that you have to do every time during your competition. Is that true? Are you a superstitious feller?
I a couple, but not like super crazy. Like, I always liked coming out of quiet time. I always was a big fan of amazing. I had a playlist, and I had to kind of dig deep to remember it this past Saturday. But it's Amazing Grace bagpipe version. Then it goes into God Bless America, Lee Greenwood. Then Robert Earl Keen, Barbecue. That's a great barbecue song. I love Robert Earl Keen, Barbecue. And then it jumps the shark a little bit and goes to Soulja Boy, Tell 'Em. And then we wrap it up with a flyover. But, that was kind of one of those things that, it kind of got me, all right, it's Saturday morning. We're in comp mode. Quiet time's over. Let's get rowdy. Let's get this thing turned in. Now, I know you got a little more of a regiment than me on that. But that was usually my big one. And then obviously, we like to throw back a little shot with every time we close a lid. Pretty adamant about that.
Pretty adamant. It's a part of the culture.
Absolutely, man. Hey, you don't want your hands shaky when you're trying to cut that brisket and put in the box, so 3 shots in and, maybe a couple of cold beers and steady hand.
Steady hand. Oh man. One of the things that we talk about a lot on here are successes. Everybody likes to talk about that. I like to talk about failures.
Yep.
Because I think that our failures are where we really learn. Do you have a favorite failure of yours during a competition that really set you up for success later?
Yeah, I would say I remember we were in a pretty good streak, one of those where, you're cooking almost every other weekend. We hadn't finished out the top 5 in a while. And I remember I was like, and I want to say, I can't remember exactly. We were maybe let's say this contest was either 3 or 4 back-to-back. So you got a little contest fatigue. Actually, I remember it perfectly now. It was the end of February. And there's a 4th contest that we have. And I just got lazy, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'd done it 3 weeks in a row and I just decided to cut a couple of corners and, man, we got humbled. You know what I mean? And I was like, but I knew going to awards, it was one of those, like when I closed the lid on the brisket box and we turned it in and we came back and cleaned up the table and sat down, and Jared's like, "So man, what'd you think about that cook?" And I was like, "Man, that's all on me." I was like, I had 3 things we were missing. I was lax. We've been knocking out of the park. So I thought we could just, roll on through it. And I made a commitment that day. We walked back from awards and I said, I'll trim my schedule down before I go out there and embarrass myself like that again. It's not to a lot of us, and that was one of the few years that I kind of cared about points. I knew it was one of the last years they were going to do best of the best up in Georgia. So I knew I wanted to finish in top 10 FBA. And back then I was working in the software business. So I wouldn't like now where if I wanted to go out and run a heavy schedule, I could. So, I knew I wanted to finish those top 10 in points, but I didn't want to do it showing up and half-assing it. So that day forward, I said, look, if I'm going to go out and I'm going to cook a contest, I'm going to make sure I got my shit together. And I would say that was probably a failure that helped. And I treat events that way now too, at Traeger and those kind of things. Like, hey, if the schedule gets too heavy, I'm going to say, hey, I can't do this one before I go out there and just mail it in because, you're putting your name on it. If it's worth putting your name on, you need to give it 110.
Right, because I mean, you don't want to go from making chicken wings for Madonna to making quiches for Nick Faldo and have those quiches be underwhelming. You just don't want that in your world. I mean,
can't have it, man.
You can't have it, Billy O.
You can't let down Nick just because Madonna was, overbearing.
Right. You can't have it. Oh, it's my favorite joke.
So you guys that don't realize, I'm sure we'll get into the interview. I'm very fortunate to get to cook for some pretty cool people, but I love it because Luke will send me a text and like, hey man, I don't want to interrupt. I'm sure you're doing Benedict for Tiger Woods, but can you
right?
Can you give me a call? It's just super funny.
Showing T-Pain how to make a pork tenderloin or something. I never know where you are, but it has turned into just it's been years long now.
Yeah, it has been. It's funny.
So let's switch gears a little bit into gear. I've seen you. I don't think I've ever seen you cook on the same thing. What's one of the best or most worthwhile investments that you've ever made in competition barbecue?
Man, I'll tell you what. The first one I would say right off the bat is an instant read thermometer.
Yeah.
And I would say not just competition barbecue. If you take your barbecue seriously, because after enough reps, you really don't need to look at the temperature anymore, right, Luke? You slide that thermopin in, and you feel you can feel that doneness and that tenderness, and you're just like, you know what? I don't even need to see what it registers at. But you only acquire that feel after thousands of reps, But I think that's a great one. I think right there with it, 1A, 1B is you gotta find a grill that provides a consistent temperature. And man, I don't care if you want to cook on a stick burner. I don't care if you want to cook on an insulated box like a Stumps or a Deep South. Obviously, I cook on Traegers. I will tell you this weekend, cooked on drums. And man, I can see why some of you guys are cooking categories on drums. That flavor, like the brisket, we scored in brisket and it had still that succulent, juicy that you love, but I called it a steakhouse brisket. You know what I mean? It had a little bit of that flavor you get from the Maillard reaction, right? That goes along with it. So it's like the best of both worlds, but getting yourself a pit that'll run consistently. When I first started, man, I was working on a couple of cheap ass stick burners and man, I was throwing a log every 30 to 45 minutes. And dude, you throw a log like that every 30, 45 minutes, by the time it comes time to build that first turn-in box, are you making those key decisions on, does it look right? Do I need to do this? Do I need to add a little bit of flavor? Dude, you're so tired. You're just wanting to get it in the box, get it shut, and get done. So I would say that those two right there, 1A, 1B, are the two things you need to make a great investment in.
Right. And I agree with you. I don't think it matters what you're cooking on too much as long as you know it.
Yes.
And you know when you have to, excuse me, and you know that you have to do certain things. Cooking on a drum is way different than cooking on a stick burner, way different than cooking on a pellet grill. However, if you know what you're doing, you can accomplish what you need to accomplish just based on what it looks like, what it feels like, what it tastes like. You can, as long as you know that, you can make those adjustments.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things too. It's kind of interesting, kind of talking about what I've, a little bit of the Traeger side of things is, it was interesting when I went there and, these guys were like, so what can you do to get these things in the hands of competition cooks? And I was like, look, man, let me reach out to my friends. I said, I'm not going to tell anybody they got to compete with them. I just wanted to put them in their backyard and I want them to cook on them. And man, look at all the guys, yourself, Fred Robles, Jeff Vanderlinde, and Jeff's always cooked on Traegers, but you get it in there and you get it in your backyard and it's convenient, right? Oh man, I want to cook some chicken breast for me and the wife. You turn it on and you kind of keep cooking on it. It's like, and then you get a category that struggles, right? And you're like, well, I want to test cook it. I want to get it figured out. Well, what's the easiest thing to test cook on? A Traeger. Right? When you're trying to do it, in the middle of the week, while you're working and taking calls and this and that, it's the easiest way to test cook. And so then some of you guys are like, man, you can turn out some good product on this, and the other pits you're cooking on are Jambos and this and that. And then you got a little Traeger over to the side. I think it's kind of cool. So yeah, once again, I agree with you. I think you can get there with any pit, but it's one that and it's one that can ride at a pretty consistent temperature or ride at the temperature you want it to ride at. Let me put it that way. Right.
And that's one of those things that it's just knowing it and cooking on it 1,000 times. I mean, I found the energy yesterday to go out and clean my timberline because I've been at home for a couple of days by myself and I haven't had a pit ready to go. And I'm like, well, this is dumb. This needs to stop right now.
Yeah.
So she's ready to go for today. You mentioned an instant read thermometer. What other purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your competition barbecue?
Ooh, besides that, under $100. Competition barbecue.
Some tool.
Yeah, no, I'm trying
something weird that you might use that nobody else uses.
No, this is way under $100, but I find it to be so damn versatile. And once again, when you're competing, you're trying to pack the least amount of stuff as possible. Just a good pair of cotton gloves. Cotton gloves that you can throw under your disposables. It makes it to where you can handle hot meat. You can handle hot racks. You don't have to worry about packing 5 or 6 different tools and a bunch. You can get 12 dozen of them for $20. You know what I mean? But to me, and that's one of the funny things during the pandemic when we were doing all these like Traeger Kitchen lives and this and that, people were like, dude, that guy just grabbed that sheet tray that's been in that Traeger for 2 hours with disposable gloves. And it's like, no, I didn't, dude. I had cottons on it underneath. But I think that's one of those things. You have a couple pairs of those laying around camp and you can move anything you need to, dump charcoal, the charcoal basket, whatever. You don't need, all these different gloves and utensils.
Right on. And they're indispensable.
Yes.
Indispensable. And you realize how much you miss them whenever you got other gloves on and you grab that rack without them.
It bites you. It reminds you.
Yeah, and that's a good one, man. That's one of the things I try and do on here is to find stuff that people can take out away from competitions that can help their everyday cook, and everybody should have a pair of these, with them. Maybe it's something Traeger should start putting in the box.
Some orange ones. There you go.
Yeah, and the orange ones.
Dude, let me tell you though, speaking of that, the meat sweats, the camouflage pants that we just did.
Yeah.
Dude, they sold out in like 4 hours. It was funny because, we were kind of going back and forth on them, and they were pricey to make because we don't want to put anything out there that's chintzy. You know what I mean? And so kind of when you back into the margins and everything, it's like, whoa, it's a $130 pair of sweatpants, but we'll see what happens. And then boom, and the amount of DMs and text I've gotten, like, dude, how'd I get my hands on those? Are there any extras laying around? Can you hook a boy up? Like, I've probably gotten like 3 dozen of those. You know what I mean? But tells you when you do something cool.
Right. And I saw him first Fred did a video of him walking through, and I'm like, bro, what's going on?
Yep.
Oh, it's funny. It's hilarious. Let's talk about people a little bit. Who's impacted your life the most in competition barbecue?
I don't have to think about that one bit, man. It was funny. I'll tell a quick story from this weekend, and it kind of sums it up. So get done, turn it in, we go make a walk, and there's Rub Bagby from Swamp Boys, and a gentleman from Seven Sins Barbecues over there talking to him. And so I didn't want to interrupt. I kind of walked over and just kind of put my arm around Hut and Rub's neck and squeezed him and said, hey, man, how'd things go today, blah, blah, blah. And the guy from Seven Sins goes, oh, my God, it's the 2 godfathers of Florida barbecue. And I'm like, no. Let me correct you. I said, that's the godfather of Florida barbecue, and pointed at Rub. And Rub goes, yeah, and Chad's my godchild. He's like, so Rub Bagby, without a doubt, had the most impact on my competition barbecue career. He was just a guy, I knew of him because he was dominating when I got into barbecue. Guys got 64 grand championships. I mean, and man, when I was in it, he was tough as nails, bro. He was one of those guys that was always going to get his 7 to get to the jack. Just a heck of a cook. And I bought a Stump's I bought a Stump's charcoal maze cooker from him. And never forget, went over and picked it up, picked his brain a little bit. And the one thing about Rub would never give you the playbook. He would, I'd go over to him and I said, look, man, practice cook pork this week. Here's exactly what I did. Here's when I pulled it. Here's what I thought about it after I, rested it and sliced it and boxed it and let it sit for 10 minutes. When I opened the box like a judge would, it looked like this to me. It tasted like this. And he'd be like, all right, well, let's go back to that wrapping stage and let's add this and this and take this out. Let's take the finish temperature up 2 degrees and let me know how that turns out. And he was just that guy. And then he did. And so then we were like pretty consistent top 10 team, but we hadn't popped a GC. So Rub has his first class. And I'm like, dude, I wouldn't miss this for the world. I cut off my left arm to go to it. So me and Matt Van go up there, Live Oak, Swanee, do the class. And then we said, we're coming back, driving back home. And there was a contest the next weekend that I tried signing up for, but they had already sent my money back. But we wanted to cook so bad. Like I literally took 37 pages of notes. And when I got home, I was so amped up. When I got home after that long ass weekend, I stayed up until 5 a.m. and I put all of Rub's notes in Visio diagrams. And so, and the Visio diagrams, yes. So I did I probably still got him somewhere on an old computer, but yes, his all 4 category program was broken out into Visio diagrams. And like seriously, like if yes, boom, if no, obviously terminate, but and just, I showed it to Rub and he's like, do not ever let any copies of that get out. He's like, because that is as streamlined as I've ever seen someone document. And man, we put a couple of our own little tweaks on it. And so we go to the next contest. So we have to fib a little bit. And Matt Van, if you've never met Matt Van, and you have, he is a wide open character. You think
all the way open.
Dude, you think I'm a lot of fun and I never turn off? I cannot hold a stick to that cat. And so Van calls me on Monday morning and goes, hey man, you're about to get a call from the organizer. We're in this weekend. So organizer calls me. I said, hey, this is Chad. She was Chad. She goes, I just got off the phone with Jeff Stevens. And I was like, okay. She's like, the director of production for foodblitz.tv. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, I had no idea they wanted to come down here and film a pilot for a TV show on you guys. That's how we got into the sold out contest. So I'm like, yeah. She's like, yeah, just bring the entry fee in cash. Like, how much room do you need? I was like, I got a 20-foot trailer. She's like, dude, we'll put you right behind the beer garden. No problem. And so I call Van and I'm like, dude, this is great. But we got to come up with a film crew, bros. Dude, I'm already a step ahead of. He's like, my brothers got a couple of stoner buddies that film alt rock concerts. They've got cameras and they've got mics. He's like, they'll do it for $100 cash and all the barbecue they can eat and all the beer they can drink. So yeah, we get out there, we get set up. Dude, I went on Microsoft Word and printed off a bunch of consent disclosure forms for filming. So like we had a clipboard of like all these disclosure forms. Dude, as soon as we got there, I had the contest organizer sign one. Like, dude, we were looking like official. These guys come out there, like they look like they just got off the plane from LA, like pointy shoes, skinny jeans, like, and dude, we played this thing to the hilt. And dude, we turned into at that point in our career, the best 4 boxes we had ever turned in. and so I'll never forget, there's the John Deere dealer was right next to us, and he had been at that event every year. I think at that time it was like a 14-year event. And he came back after I'd take him a sample every turn in. And he comes back after brisket and he goes, And I'd probably had a couple sodas by this point. And he said, y'all gonna win today. I said, well, sir, what makes you think that? And he said, been doing this 14 years ago. That's the best 4 bites of barbecue I've ever had at this event. It was on the same day from the same team.
Wow.
And I was like, dang, man. I said, so you're confident? He was very. I said, all right, cool. Which one of them John Deere's you gonna let me drive on stage? And dude, without a hesitation, he goes, well, everybody knows we got the lawnmower. Everybody knows we got the Gator, but nobody knows we got this new mini Gator. I said, all right, man, that's what I'm taking up there. If we do.
Is this real?
It was real as hell, dude. It was Pig on the Pond, 2010, Claremont, Florida. If you ever have Rub on the show, he could verify the whole story. So we go to awards. It's a 30-person team. That's all they can fit. And, dude, we walked the dog. It was like a second chicken, first brisket, fourth pork, first brisket. And so, man, we come off the stage from brisket, and there's this John Deere guy standing in the back of the mini Gator waving the keys. And so I go back there, and he's like, all right, man, here's forward, here's reverse. I'm like, oh, we're doing this. All right. So I get this thing they call reserve, and I start to wheel this thing up there. And at the time when we were coming up, there was another great barbecue team that kind of came in at the same time as we did called Team Unknown. And Team Unknown was Papa Clark, Dorsey, JW. And Papa Clark says, none of you boys go right up there with you? I was like, they're too scared, Papa Clark. He's like, man, I'll ride shotgun with you. Let me jump in this thing. And so they call us for grand, and I wheel that thing up there to the stage, and organizer's like, whoa, you know what I mean? So, she's like, Chad, you got anything you want to say? And dude, never give Chad Ward a hot mic. That's probably rule number one. That's probably rule number one in life, bro. And I said, yeah, I got a little something I'd like to say. And I was like, hey, Rub Bagby, why don't you stand up? And I was like, I'm going to tell all you guys right now, for any of y'all that have been thinking you want to know what a grand championship feels like, and this and I was like, man, 7 days ago, we were at Rub's class, and we were, a consistent top 10 team, just like a lot of y'all out there. I said, and do one weekend with that guy, and you can see where we are now. I said, no offense, but we dominated y'all today. I said, so if you want to dominate somebody at your next contest, you need to go talk to that guy.
Wow.
Rub sold 2 full classes that day. But he is one of those guys that if I go to him now, he'll give me advice just like he did back then. So much mutual respect and love for each other, man. And I'm so happy to see that guy, because the other thing about Rub, too, just talk about what kind of guy he is. I mean, Rub dedicated his career to special needs kids and teaching them. And, man, there's a soft place in my heart for people like that make that kind of sacrifice. And not a sacrifice, but have that kind of patience.
Right.
And just love giving back to that, because it's a very hard, very, very hard job, even harder than just regular teaching. But, man, so much respect for that guy, and probably wouldn't be here where I am today without him.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he's I need to have him on here. I've approached him about being on here, and he's like, I don't cook anymore. And I'm like, it's not about that, bro. You're one of the OGs. You're one of the people whose stories that we need to be told. Needs to be told. It needs to be on record. And I remember I won a seat to one of his classes. He did one of those online auctions. And I went down there, and I was like, he starts off with, I'm not going to show you what I do in a competition. I'm like, bro, I just traveled a long way to be here. Had a little too much fun in Tampa the night before. But I remember walking away going, man, I just learned so much about cooking, not just competition barbecue, but cooking.
Well, in talking to Rub, I think he always taught the technique. I think the one thing is you always maybe got a flavor profile, the last flavor profile, because he was pretty, changing it, not super often, but enough. And I think that was it. But, man, yeah, I mean, I learned, I remember I never had an idea on how do you separate the point and flat without just butchering one or the other. And that was one of the great things I took from his class. Like, there was just little things like trimming chicken. I learned a ton in his class about how to trim chicken.
Absolutely. And, he's just a great guy, and just so much knowledge and just salt of the earth. he's one of those guys that, Florida OG barbecue. People don't understand Florida OG barbecue until they go to Florida and experience it themselves. That's 100% accurate. Well, I knew this would happen. It's, we've hit our time limit, and I asked you like 4 questions.
Dude, that is all right, man. I am more than happy to come back on. I know we got a lot more to talk about.
We got to do a part 2, but I got to hit you with these rapid fires real quick.
Do it.
Because that's what the people demand.
All right.
Don't want to make them unhappy.
No, we got to take care of the people, oh boy.
What do you see about barbecue on social media that upsets or bothers you?
Entitlement.
Oh, wow. Okay, that could be a whole podcast.
Yeah, no, it is. But yeah, we can put on that later. But it's the world owes me this, or this brand owes me that. No, man, nobody owes you nothing. I always felt like the power of social media was allowing people to share their passion, not people going out trying to create a career and monetizing it.
Right. Do you have a favorite pre, during, or post-competition meal?
Yes, pizza afterwards, always.
Always paid for by the winner, correct?
Or I'd have no problem bringing my big ass home, paying for it myself.
Do you have a favorite present that you like to give to people?
It's usually a nice bottle of booze. It's probably always good to go with, especially if it's a good friend. You know what they like. You run across a bottle they haven't had. Like, I think that's always cool. Then that allows them to share that with other friends and tell the story how they got it.
That's awesome. All right, last one. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with a message on it for millions of people, what would it say and why?
Oh, man. It would probably say, cooking brisket fat side up does not moisturize the meat. Myth demolished.
Myth demolished. I couldn't agree with you more.
Keeping it lighthearted, that would be.
Right.
But besides using it to cure, world peace or cancer or hunger, it would just be.
Stop cooking that thing fat side up.
It does not moisturize the meat. Myth demolished.
Myth demolished. That's amazing. Yeah. It's physically impossible for that.
I always tell people, and people, when I say that in class, like back when we did in-person classes, like I look like the guy with the crazy shorts, but also 3 heads. Like, man, what do you mean? I grew up and it's like, guys, it's real simple. How does an oil-based fat moisturize a water-based muscle fiber? Like, we learned that, I don't know. I went to Polk County schools, and I knew it by 2nd grade, so that means everybody else knew it by kindergarten.
Oh, man. All right. Well, we'll definitely have to do a part 2.
I'm going to hold you to that, old boy.
Absolutely.
Hey, I would say let's do it next week, but I gotta cook buffalo tenders for Barry Sanders at the Super Bowl. So, what are you going to do?
Oh, man. Barry Sanders. I met Barry Sanders.
Dude, I met him 2 years ago at the Super Bowl. He is the most unimposing dad bod guy ever right now.
He's a dick.
Well, he was a jerk to you?
No. So I met him, Jerry Rice, and Marcus Allen at the same time.
Okay.
And I'm getting my picture taken with him. And I looked at Barry Sanders and I said, "You destroyed a day of my childhood." And mind you, Barry is not big. No. He's a little guy, and I'm towering over Barry. And I'm like, you really messed up a day of my childhood. And he just looked at me and I went, Sun Bowl, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. You and Thurman Thomas both went over 200 yards rushing. I was like, it devastated me as a child. And Barry kind of laughed. And Jerry Rice said, "I remember that game." And Marcus Allen looked at Jerry Rice and said, "You don't remember that shit." And I was just sitting there in complete and total awe, like, this just happened.
No, it was yeah. He is such like a small dude. But the other thing, tell me, you thought he ruined your childhood. I mean, how many years that guy had to play in Denver that ruined his adult life, or in Detroit that ruined his adult life?
Right, he kind of got payback for it. So,
dude, it was so funny. I saw a guy this weekend at Pig Fest. He came over. He was buddies with somebody that we knew, and somebody introduced me to him. I shook his hand. And he's wearing a Lions jacket, and I said, "Bro, you don't need a handshake. You need a hug."
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, let's get together and do part 2. I'm going to try and have Rub on in between.
That sounds awesome. I'll text him and tell him I did the show and had a great time with you. You'll be reaching out.
All right, bud. Thanks a lot. Man. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, brother.
Thank you for listening to Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast. Be sure to subscribe and like the podcast, rate the podcast, and to share it out with your friends. Also, be sure to check out the Old Virginia Smoke TikTok as well. Old Virginia Smoke, one word. That's all you have to search for. It's hilarious. Tune in next week for another great episode of Pitmaster. For companies interested in advertising, please contact Old Virginia Smoke directly via www.oldvirginiasmoke.com. Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast, is edited by Chris Stadanka. Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast, is a property of Old Virginia Smoke LLC. All rights reserved. Copyright 2022.